Karoline Leavitt wasn't just confident, she was calculated, sharp-tongued, and ready to dominate the floor like she always did on cable news panels. Her heels clicked like gunshots as she strutted into the packed congressional briefing hall, her team trailing behind her like silent shadows. Cameras were already flashing. The public was watching. This was her moment. Karoline didn't want to make a point, she wanted to leave a scar. And the one person she aimed to rattle today was Jasmine Crockett. But Jasmine was already there, sitting calmly at the front with her notes folded and her eyes locked on the crowd. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch as Karoline's presence sucked the air from the room. Jasmine had seen the headlines. She'd heard the whispers. She knew Karoline had been rehearsing, rallying her base, preparing to use this hearing to flex and humiliate anyone who dared stand in her way. But what Karoline didn't expect was the kind of heat Jasmine had been holding back. And that heat was about to erupt. Karoline didn't wait long. As soon as the session was called to order, she launched in. Her voice was sharp, smug, loaded with the confidence of someone who thought they'd already won. She mocked funding bills, misquoted legislation, threw out half-true stats like they were gospel. Then she looked Jasmine dead in the face and said something that made the room freeze. "You stand here pretending to fight for justice, Congresswoman Crockett. But where exactly have you been when real leadership was needed?" Gasps, shifts in seats, reporters leaning in. Jasmine didn't blink. The room was quiet, too quiet. Karoline smirked, thinking she'd scored the moment for every headline she'd dreamed of. She expected hesitation, stammering, maybe even a weak deflection. What she got was a silence so calm it became dangerous. Jasmine leaned forward just enough to let Karoline know she wasn't going to play defense. She was about to turn the entire floor into a battlefield. "Miss Leavitt," Jasmine began, her voice low but steady, "I suggest you buckle up." And then it began. Jasmine rose to her feet, not slowly, not dramatically, just enough to remind everyone watching who held the room. Her words came fast but clear. Each sentence was like a punch behind velvet gloves. She corrected Karoline's numbers without looking at her notes. She dismantled every fake stat with real ones, pointing out direct consequences Karoline's proposals had caused in struggling communities. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Karoline shifted in her seat. Jasmine's tone shifted. Her words hit harder now. She painted stories, not theories. She spoke about the mother who couldn't afford insulin because of policies Karoline supported. She laid bare the facts about housing collapses and community clinics that vanished under Leavitt's endorsed cuts. The air got thicker. Reporters were scribbling like mad. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." But Jasmine didn't stop. She leaned on every lived experience, every broken promise made to the very people Karoline claimed to champion. She turned statistics into faces, votes into consequences. She reminded everyone that behind Karoline's smugness were real people who bled, starved, and cried while cameras rolled and tweets were fired. By the time she finished, the room was still. Karoline's smirk had vanished. Her face was pale, lips tight, fingers clutching the edge of her folder like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Jasmine sat back down, didn't look at her. Didn't need to. Karoline knew. This wasn't a debate. This was a warning. Karoline sat frozen. Cameras were everywhere, but the heat wasn't coming from their flashes. It was radiating off Jasmine Crockett, who had just detonated an entire chamber of smug posturing and hollow arguments with a calmness that cut sharper than any outburst ever could. Karoline's throat felt dry, her jaw locked, but there was no turning back. She had challenged someone who didn't just know her facts, she lived them, breathed them, and had been forged by the fight long before this chamber's lights ever found her. Still, Karoline had built her brand on arrogance, and arrogance doesn't back down. It reloads, so she forced a smile and fired back. "Congresswoman Crockett, with all due respect, these emotionally charged stories don't change policy reality. You don't fix a broken economy with feelings." Her voice was stiff, trembling just beneath the surface. But she threw the line anyway, like a final stone at an avalanche she'd already unleashed. Jasmine didn't react. Not with a smirk, not with a rebuttal. She let the silence expose Karoline's desperation. The real damage wasn't done through what Jasmine had said. It was in what Karoline couldn't hide now. Her voice betrayed her. Her eyes darted. And even the staffers behind her were shifting awkwardly in their seats, unsure if they should keep taking notes or quietly start packing up the performance. Jasmine leaned forward again, slow and deliberate, not for drama, but precision. She locked eyes with Karoline and spoke low, firm, and unshakable. You know what's funny? Every time someone like you tries to reduce lived struggle into feelings, it's because the truth makes you uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, because it's inconvenient. The words didn't land like accusations, they landed like reflections. Karoline's mouth opened slightly, like she might object, but she couldn't form anything. There was too much weight on her chest, and every camera in that room was capturing it. Jasmine wasn't just exposing weak points in a political argument. She was revealing a lack of humanity, and doing it with such brutal clarity that it left no room for spin. Jasmine kept going, her voice steady, unshaken, now directing her words not just at Karoline but at the room itself. You think policy is data, but policy is people. It's the kid who goes to sleep hungry while you tweet about fiscal responsibility. It's the disabled veteran who's been evicted twice because the programs you oppose would have kept him off the street. You think this is about optics? This is about survival. And if survival makes you uncomfortable, you're not fit to be anywhere near this chamber. Gasps echoed across the rows. One reporter nearly dropped his pen. Another whispered into their mic. This just became a career-defining moment. Karoline blinked hard. Sweat began to trace along the edge of her hairline, but she kept her posture stiff like she could still salvage it, still claw her way back. She tried to retort, something half-formed about financial literacy, but her voice cracked. And it wasn't just the nerves. It was the realization that this wasn't a television debate. She wasn't up against someone who could be rattled with fast talking and fake smiles. She was facing someone whose strength came from the raw, unfiltered pain of the people she defended every day. Karoline looked around for support. None came. Her aides avoided eye contact. Reporters ignored her. All focus was on Jasmine, who now stood again, calmly unfolding another sheet from her folder. This is a photo, Jasmine said, holding it up without needing to explain it yet, of a grandmother who lost 3 family members during a winter blackout because deregulation supported by your donors let the power grid fail. She didn't ask for sympathy. She asked for accountability. And this is her on her porch, bundled in a coat, holding the urns. You want numbers? That's 3. She dropped the photo on the table. The sound of paper hitting wood shouldn't have echoed, but it did. Everyone heard it. And then Jasmine did something unexpected. She turned the moment, flipped it in real time, shifting from confrontation to clarity, from tearing down to building up. Her tone didn't soften, but it deepened. You don't have to care. That's your right. But don't come in here pretending to speak for the people you've never even tried to meet. You don't understand struggle because you've never had to. And the second someone brings it to your face, your whole strategy crumbles. This isn't theater for me. This is my life's work. And if you think you can turn that into a soundbite, you better bring something stronger than smugness. Karoline's shoulders dropped, almost imperceptibly, but enough that even viewers at home would notice. Her notes sat untouched. Her prepared closing was useless now. Jasmine had redefined the entire tone of the hearing. She hadn't just exposed Karoline's weaknesses. She'd built a wall around the truth so solid that nothing Karoline could say would climb it. And the most devastating part? Jasmine hadn't raised her voice once. Reporters were already texting editors. Social feeds began lighting up with the words Crockett and obliterated. Even neutral members of the chamber were leaning back, their expressions stunned into silence. Karoline, sensing the shift too late, reached for her water, took a sip, tried to steady herself. But the weight of what she'd walked into, no, the weight of what she had triggered, was too much to spin away. And Jasmine just sat there now, her presence silent but enormous. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She knew the work wasn't finished. But for this round, for this battle, she had made the truth unignorable. Karoline had entered the room thinking she would challenge Jasmine Crockett. Now she sat there, shattered, exposed, stripped of every illusion she'd brought with her. And she knew it. Karoline's voice cracked as she pushed forward with a final jab, her breath heavy and her face flushed. "You're nothing but noise in a suit, Jasmine. All flair, no foundation." The room didn't gasp. It held its breath, because in the very next second, Jasmine Crockett didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't even glance away. She straightened just slightly, stepped out from behind the podium like someone stepping into a storm barefoot and barehanded. She didn't need volume. She had gravity. "Sit down," she said flatly, not raising her voice, not smiling. Just heat, controlled, smoldering. Karoline hesitated, eyes darting like she realized she stepped on something she shouldn't have. But Jasmine didn't give her a second to recover. "You came here with a script, a little TikTok-ready monologue. Problem is, this ain't an influencer stage, and you walked into a damn courtroom without your lawyer." The audience shifted. Some murmured. Jasmine kept moving, words cutting like the edge of broken glass wrapped in velvet. "You stand here pretending to speak for America, but America's bleeding while you chase retweets. You want attention. I want answers. And that's why you'll never hold this mic like I do." Karoline tried to interrupt, but Jasmine didn't break. "Let me make this real simple. You don't know policy, you don't know people, and you damn sure don't know pain." She pointed at her own chest. "I've walked into homes where the only heat in winter came from a lit stove. I've held mothers shaking from grief while you were posting your campaign selfies in a red dress. You want to compare resumes? Let's talk about hours spent fighting evictions, not hours spent rehearsing your Fox News soundbites. Let's talk about experience, not exposure." Her voice wasn't yelling, it was pressing down like weight on Karoline's spine. "You are a headline without a story. And every time you open your mouth, it's just a reminder you've never had to fight for anything except attention." Karoline stepped back, visibly stunned, her breath catching as if the walls had closed in around her. But Jasmine wasn't done. She moved closer, her tone heavier now, steel under silk. "See, when I speak, I carry the names of girls who didn't get to make it out. I carry grandmothers who prayed over bills like scripture. I carry fathers who built futures out of nothing but calloused hands and faith. Who do you carry, Karoline?" Jasmine didn't wait for an answer. "The donor who told you how to vote? The handler who wrote your clapbacks? That's not leadership. That's theater, and you forgot your costume." The room was locked in silence, the kind where even the lights feel like they're listening. Karoline's face tightened, jaw grinding, but her eyes betrayed the unraveling. She opened her mouth but couldn't get a word past her throat. Jasmine stepped in again, not as an attack, but like a revelation peeling the gloss off Karoline's campaign persona. "You talk about patriotism but stand with people who wouldn't recognize justice if it walked up and slapped their gold lapel pins off. You talk about freedom, but vote against feeding children. You talk about values but hide behind them like shields while people drown in systems you help rig." A pause, a breath. Then Jasmine's voice cracked through again, louder now. "You came at me because you thought I was soft, that I'd bow, that I'd smile through it. But what you didn't know is I came up through fire. You can't scare what's already been through hell." People started nodding, not just clapping, agreeing, feeling it in their bones. The energy shifted completely. Karoline was frozen, and not because she didn't have more lines, but because those lines meant nothing now. Jasmine tilted her head slightly, not mocking, but decisive. "You regret stepping up because you didn't come ready. This isn't a hashtag war. This is where voices rise from the dirt, not the studio. This is where truth don't need makeup. She took a step back, gaze locked like iron. Don't ever come at me unless you're prepared to carry everything I've survived. The silence afterward was so full, it was deafening. The air in the chamber didn't just thicken. It became a blanket that pressed down on everyone in the room. Silence gripped every corner. Every eye flicked between Karoline and Jasmine, waiting for the storm to break. But Jasmine's stance was firm, unshaken. She stood as solid as a mountain, her presence absorbing all the attention without needing to raise her voice. Karoline, on the other hand, could feel the ground beneath her trembling. She had entered the room with every intention of showing she was the new force to be reckoned with. But now, her composure was crumbling faster than she could pull herself together. Her fingers, usually so composed, trembled slightly as they gripped the edge of the podium. She could feel the heat rising from her neck, spreading through her chest. The steady thrum of her pulse felt louder in her ears than the rest of the world. She tried to steady herself, to push past the knot in her throat, but Jasmine's words sliced through her defenses with ruthless precision. When you rise to speak, Jasmine's voice cut through the room like a blade. Make sure you've done more than rehearse your speech. The words weren't angry, but they stung more than any shouted insult ever could. Karoline's lips parted, but no sound came out. It wasn't that she didn't have a response. It was that she couldn't find the strength to say it. Jasmine didn't wait for her to find her footing. You claim to care about policy, but all I see is an attempt to build your platform on the backs of people you don't even understand. A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd, but Karoline, flustered, reached for her papers. Her hands were shaking now. Every part of her wanted to claw back, to fight back, but the words wouldn't come. Jasmine's eyes, sharp as knives, watched her every move. Jasmine leaned in slightly, pushing her presence further into the space, making the walls feel smaller. You talk about freedom, Jasmine continued, her voice steady, unwavering, but you've never fought for it. You've never sacrificed for it. You've never had to listen to the cries of children in poverty, the struggles of single mothers who are barely holding on. But you have the nerve to walk in here and lecture us all on what's right and wrong. The words stung so sharply that Karoline took an instinctive step back, the distance between them growing. Her breath came too quickly, and her throat felt tight, like there was something lodged deep inside it that she couldn't swallow. She hadn't expected to be on the defensive. She thought her challenge would have been enough to get a reaction from Jasmine, but Jasmine wasn't the one to be rattled. Karoline opened her mouth to respond, but the words died on her lips before they could fully form. She was on the edge of losing control. This wasn't how she'd envisioned this encounter. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Jasmine's gaze never left her. You want to challenge me, Karoline. Jasmine's voice dipped low, each word coming out slowly and deliberately, like she was carving through stone. Then show me you've earned the right to stand here. Don't come in here with nothing but slogans and catchphrases because that's all you've got. You want to act like you've done something for this country, for its people? Then you better start delivering results that aren't wrapped in a press release with your name at the top. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Karoline to respond, to throw some retort, to fire back with the sharp words she'd been rehearsing. But nothing came. She felt naked in front of everyone, vulnerable in a way she hadn't anticipated. She had thought this moment would be hers to control, but instead, it was slipping through her fingers. And the harder she tried to grasp it, the faster it disappeared. Jasmine continued, her voice even now, but with an edge to it that made Karoline's stomach tighten. You think you're here to fix things, to speak for people? I don't think you understand what it means to actually fix something, Karoline. Do you know what it's like to be on the front lines of a war against an unjust system? I've been there, I've seen it, and I've fought through it. So don't stand there with your rehearsed lines and think you've got the right to lecture me, to lecture any of us on what it means to fight for real change. Every word she said was like a punch to the gut. Karoline could feel the flush creeping up her neck, her face burning with humiliation. The thought of responding, of finding the right words to make Jasmine see the strength in her own stance, seemed more and more impossible. How could she make Jasmine understand? How could she stand up and declare that she was just as capable, just as committed to making change? But the more she tried to form her defense, the more the room seemed to shrink around her, trapping her in the weight of Jasmine's unrelenting gaze. "I didn't come here to perform," Jasmine continued, her voice lowering with each word, the power in it unmistakable. "I came here because people need real solutions. People need real change. Not some charade. Not a fake story about being the next big thing. This isn't a game. This isn't about what sounds good. It's about what actually works." The room remained dead silent, but the energy had shifted completely. Every eye was on Karoline now, but the pity in their gazes stung more than anything. She wasn't being seen as a leader anymore. She was being seen as a child who had wandered too far from home, out of her depth, without the tools to truly make a difference. Karoline's hands were still shaking. Her chest felt tight, and her vision began to blur as the weight of the moment hit her. She had failed. Jasmine stood unwavering, her words still hanging in the air like an unshakable storm. "You don't get to walk into this room and disrespect the work we've done. You don't get to pretend you understand the lives of the people you claim to represent." She stepped forward, closing the space between them. Karoline stood frozen in place. "You want to know what it really means to fight? To stand for something?" Jasmine's voice was now a low, steady whisper, but it had the power of 1,000 voices. "Then come back when you've earned it. Come back when you've done the work. Until then, don't bother. You'll be nothing but a blip in the wind." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the rapid beating of Karoline's heart. The words had landed. They had crushed her. And now, with nowhere left to go, she could only stand there, utterly defeated, under the weight of Jasmine's dominance. The audience watched in stunned silence. Karoline knew the cameras were rolling. She could feel the world outside this room now turning its gaze on her. And what they saw wasn't strength. It wasn't the confident, polished politician who had entered. No, they were seeing her for what she was, a novice, someone out of her depth, someone who had underestimated the force of someone like Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine turned away, walking back to her seat with the confidence of someone who had already won. The tension in the room seemed to dissolve as the focus shifted away from Karoline, who was left standing there, stripped of every ounce of control she'd thought she had. Jasmine didn't need to look back. Her silence spoke louder than any applause ever could. The silence stretched on like a suffocating fog, and Karoline could feel every inch of her body growing colder, more distant from the world around her. Her hands, still trembling, clutched at the podium as though it was the only thing keeping her grounded. The weight of Jasmine's words clung to her like chains, an unshakable reminder that she had entered this battle unprepared, underestimating the force of her opponent. Karoline could feel the eyes of everyone in the room, their pitying gazes cutting through her like 1,000 blades. It was clear now she had failed, and the feeling of defeat was as palpable as the sweat that dripped from her brow. Jasmine, on the other hand, seemed almost to glow with power. She stood effortlessly, radiating confidence that could not be questioned. It wasn't just her words that had won this confrontation. It was her presence, her unyielding ability to stand tall against any challenge. Jasmine had proven that her strength came not from the speeches or promises that Karoline relied on, but from the lived experience, the years of sacrifice, and the unwavering belief in what she was fighting for. The crowd, which had been holding its collective breath, finally exhaled. The tension that had hung in the air for what seemed like an eternity dissipated in the blink of an eye, leaving behind an almost uncomfortable calm. Karoline, though, could not shake the feeling that everything she had built her campaign on had just crumbled in front of her. The confidence she had so carefully cultivated had evaporated, leaving only a hollow shell in its place. She couldn't even meet Jasmine's gaze anymore. Every inch of her body screamed to flee, to escape the room where her humiliating defeat had been laid bare for everyone to see. But she couldn't. She was frozen. She had no way out. Jasmine didn't look back as she moved to her seat. Her composure never faltered, her expression never wavered. It was as though she had already won, as though she had been preparing for this moment for years and knew exactly how it would unfold. Karoline, on the other hand, still stood at the podium, motionless, her heart pounding in her chest. There was a strange sort of pressure building inside her, a fire that had been lit with Jasmine's words, and now it was roaring, threatening to consume her. She had been humiliated, yes, but in that moment, something within her snapped. No longer could she stand by quietly, pretending to be the person everyone thought she was. No longer could she cower under the weight of Jasmine's words. Karoline's shoulders squared, her jaw clenched, and she took a deep breath, forcing the words that had been stuck in her throat to rise to the surface. The audience, sensing something shift in the room, looked up with renewed attention. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every movement, every glance, every change in posture. Karoline straightened, her eyes now sharp with an intensity that hadn't been there before. She could feel the heat in her chest, the fire that Jasmine's words had sparked in her. "You think this is over?" Karoline's voice rang out, louder than she had intended, but the power behind it was undeniable. For the first time in this entire exchange, she had taken control. She had felt the sting of defeat, but now it was transforming into something else, something she could use. "You think you've won just because you've made me uncomfortable? Just because you've made me look weak in front of all these people?" Her voice was no longer trembling. It was firm, resolute. "Let me make this very clear. This is far from over. You may have gotten the better of me in this moment, but I won't back down. I never have." The room, which had been eerily quiet, now buzzed with energy. The shift was palpable. Karoline had found her voice again. She had been knocked down, but she wasn't going to stay down. Not anymore. Jasmine, who had been sitting calmly, watching Karoline's transformation, now tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she took in Karoline's change in demeanor. There was no arrogance in Jasmine's gaze, no sense of superiority. There was only quiet recognition, as if she had seen something in Karoline that even Karoline herself hadn't realized was there. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze between them. Jasmine's gaze held steady, and Karoline, despite the humiliation she had just endured, stood her ground. The tension was thick now, and the energy in the room was crackling, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Karoline took another step forward, her chest rising and falling with each breath. "You've underestimated me, Jasmine. You think you've won because of one moment, but I've learned something today, and that's not just something about you. It's something about myself, so go ahead, keep looking down on me. But know this fight is far from over. You may have had the upper hand today, but I will rise again. And when I do, you'll regret ever thinking you could silence me." Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't move. But her lips twitched upward ever so slightly, the faintest hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. There was no malice in it. It wasn't a smile of victory. It was something else entirely: acknowledgement, respect. "You're right," Jasmine said, her voice low, almost a whisper, but the words reached Karoline's ears with clarity. "This fight isn't over. But the question is, what are you going to do with the lessons you've learned today?" The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It wasn't a taunt, nor was it a challenge. It was a simple statement, a fact. And Karoline knew it. She had learned something today. And though the sting of defeat still burned in her chest, she now saw the truth. This wasn't just about winning. It was about understanding the battle. It was about knowing when to stand tall and knowing when to step back, recalibrate, and come back stronger. The room seemed to hold its breath as Karoline's expression softened. She wasn't defeated anymore. She was determined. She was focused. She had learned from this encounter, and that alone gave her the strength to move forward. And as the cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment, it became clear to everyone in the room the story was far from over. In the end, it wasn't about who won or lost this particular round. It was about the fire that had been ignited within Karoline. The true test wasn't how she handled failure, it was how she would rise from it. And Karoline Leavitt, for all her faults, would rise again.
Thank you for watching our channel Modern Stories. If you liked our video, you should subscribe for more amazing videos like this. Have a healthy and happy day. See you in the next one.